Hello and thanks for joining me today. I want to preface this video with an apology. The quality of this video is not the best. I had some technical issues, but I thought I'd still share it with you because there's some great techniques in here. I'm going to start off showing you all the products I pulled out. I pulled out a ton of stuff, all my distress oxides. I pulled out every single one of those cubes that I own. I also have this gel press that I just ordered from Scrap and Stamp, and I'm excited to use it today. It comes in this great clamshell. You can see it here. I have my brayer. I also have some watercolor paper from Canson, some Nina White classic cardstock. These are all cut down to A2 size cards bases. There's my Nina classic Solar Classic White Crest there. I also have a ton of stamps that I had in my stash that I either haven't used in a long time, haven't used at all. Some were given to me, some I purchased. I thought these would be really cool looks on these backgrounds, this kind of like vintage style. I love these little bugs. Tim Holtz stamp sets are always great for this. I've got some textured backgrounds. This Concord 9th Barnwood one, I love it. Haven't used it yet. That's from Scrap and Stamp. This one's from the dollar store. Again, some more vintage style looking stamps. And this set here I actually got from a paper crafting magazine and haven't used it, but look at this. Look at all these awesome images. So I think it would be great with this gel press. Let's get started here. It does come with some instructions. You can go ahead and read them and see how you can go about it. I just dove right in like I do. I'm adhering this gel plate to my Tim Holtz glass media mat, making sure that my mat was clean and that bad boy's not going anywhere. I pulled up my papers and I've started out with some distress oxides. This first one is peacock feathers, and I think this is fossilized amber that I have, or it could be the honey one. I'm sorry, I forget. And unfortunately the video quality isn't the greatest. So I've smushed those onto that gel plate and I'm using the brayer just to kind of blend those together. And then I don't want to waste that ink, so I grab a spare piece of cardstock there and brayer off the extra ink onto that. And I'll continue to do that throughout the process, not to waste any ink. I'm pulling off some of these Tim Holtz stamps here, adhering them to some acrylic blocks and then stamping them down onto the gel plate and then stamping them off onto another piece of paper. Again, I want to try and create as many backgrounds as possible, and I don't want to waste any of that ink, so I'm just simply stamping it onto the gel plate and then stamping that stamp onto another piece of cardstock. And I'll just continue to do this and layer onto that side piece of cardstock there. You can kind of see the images on the gel plate that I'm getting, that I'm kind of removing that ink and pulling it off, and that'll give us that negative image. So now I'll lay down this cardstock and giving it a gentle rub, also using my brayer just to make sure I get a good impression. And look at that, that's the negative image of those stamps. How cool is that? I'm not going to waste any of that ink. I'm going to get another piece of cardstock and just clean off my gel plate just by pulling up that ink. And you can get some really cool textures and layering just by doing this and create some cool backgrounds. Now moving on, I give it just a quick wipe with microfiber cloth, and I'm diving back in. I think this is the lipstick one and the preserves there, or wilted violet, sorry. Again, I'm going to kind of brayer those two colors together and not wasting any ink. Cleaning off my brayer on the side and then with a microfiber cloth, and I'm bringing the stamps in again and just continuing that process where I'm going to stamp the stamp down onto the gel plate and then stamp that image off onto my cardstock. And I'll go ahead and continue to pick some images that I think would look really neat in negative, as well as stamping them off. Now I will warn you that if you are using words like I am here, when you place your cardstock down onto the gel plate and pull it off, that negative image is going to be backwards. So keep that in mind if you're using words. It didn't bother me. I just think it kind of added to the cool layering and texturing of my project, but just something to keep in mind if you do want those words to be legible. You'll just kind of want to keep that in mind. So as you can see here, I'm just continuing through the process. Again, I apologize for the lighting of this video. I know it's really hard to see, but I really want you to see just kind of how easy this whole technique is. So there you go, I've pulled it up and there's that negative image. Again, not wasting any of that ink. I'm just using the scrap piece, and what I'll eventually do with that scrap piece is I can create a background out of it by adding more stamping on top, or I can simply use it to cut sentiments out. So just keep that in mind that, you know, this is a great project because you're not actually wasting anything. I'm going to use some brighter colors here. I think that's the Faded Jeans, the Candied Apple, the Honey, and I think that's the Cracked Pistachio I used. I chose these more vintage looking stamps here. These ones actually didn't work as well. I was a bit disappointed. I'm not sure if it was because I hadn't used the stamps before, or if they're just not a stamp that's going to work with this technique. I stamped them down onto that gel plate and then tried to transfer the image, and it didn't really work. And then when I laid my paper down and I tried to pull it up, again, I didn't really get a nice image. I got some great colors, but I didn't get the images I want. That's okay, I'll still continue to use this piece and create something out of it. Again, wiping off my gel plate, I gave it a little bit of a squirt of water there, and I wanted to show you that it really takes nothing to get this plate clean. Here's a baby wipe, and you can see that I've got most of the ink off just by pulling it up with some cardstock. Alright, we're going to move on here. I'm going to throw these off to the side as I was really not happy with those. I won't continue working with them. And I'm going to go on to my next set of stamps. Before I do that, I wanted to show you quickly the backgrounds that we've created so far. These ones are really cool. I think they're going to make fun cards, and I'm going to set those off to the side. I'm bringing in this stamp set that I got from a crafting magazine. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Card Maker or Paper Crafter. But it just shows you that it doesn't matter what stamps you use with this technique. Pull out what you have in your stash. Again, I'm just smushing my ink pad onto this gel plate. I'm going to give my brayer a quick wipe. You don't have to because it could add texture and unique colors to your project, but I wanted to clean mine off. Again, brayering off that extra ink after I kind of blend them together. And these were brand new. I hadn't yet used them, so it takes me a bit to actually get them off of the backing there. This one's a really fun one. It's like an old typewriter, and I thought it would look really neat as that negative image. And then I can go ahead and just stamp that directly down onto a scrap piece for the more solid image. Again, I'm just kind of using my fingers here to press, and then I'll pull that paper away and look at that negative image you get. Two really cool, unique looks that we can create things out of. Again, pulling up that extra ink on a scrap piece, and I'll set that aside. Alright, I am moving on to another really cool stamp from this set, and this is the, I think this one was some flowers. Oh no, actually, you know what, I stuck with the typewriter. I wanted to try doing a more solid image just with some black soot. So I stamped down some black soot and then stamped that over top, and got a more solid image out of that. I really like that look. So you can definitely go back and layer more on top, and I'll show you a bit more of that here in a second. Alright, smushing some more of that ink down. You can also use acrylic paints with this. You can use, what else have I seen people use? The regular distress inks on this. So this plate is really cool. What you can also do is not clean the gel press off. A lot of people will leave their acrylic paints on there so that each time that they layer and pull, they get really cool different textured looks and almost like, I don't know, vintage or patina looks. I'm not quite there. I need to clean my materials and tools off. I kind of like to have things clean, but maybe down the road I'll loosen up a bit and be able to do that. But today's not the day, my friends. So again, just layering some of these inks on top of this other piece where I stamped the more solid typewriter, and I like that look. It's hard to see in the video, but at the end I'll show you pictures of all of the cards that I made, and you can really get a good look at the textures and colors that we have. I also will apologize for my voiceover today because I had video and computer issues. I am now doing this very early the morning of Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to you guys. And I've got my kids and my dogs and cats rolling around, so you might hear some interesting sounds in the background. And I probably have like morning voice, so I apologize for that. All right, just finished pulling up some more ink there with different images from this set. Cleaning off, I just used water, you see there, with a spray bottle and a microfiber cloth. Nothing too special to clean this gel plate off with. I do recommend that you keep your clamshell and those clear plastic pieces that are around the gel plate, because you'll want to store them in that. My gel plate clamshell, or the clamshell, plastic clamshell that mine came in, actually cracked, so I likely will put those plastic pieces back on it and then just store it in a Ziploc bag, just to make sure that because it is kind of sticky, you don't want any lint or anything sticking to it. That would, you know, it might add texture to your project, because you can use all sorts of mediums and textures, but yeah, I just don't want any cat hair or anything to stick to mine. This card that I'm making now is probably one of my favorite. I actually made it with a very special lady in mind, my bonus daughter, and today is her birthday, so a very happy birthday to her. Again, just stamping the images onto the gel plate and then down onto some scrap piece of paper, and then I'll end up getting two backgrounds at once during this process. A lot of these images I'm using are like dragonflies, some bees, some honeycombs, some florals. I think that really helps add to the look. And here I'm going to, I start with my rubbing it down with the fingers. Look at that, those colors. That's that wilted violet and I think the walnut. And now I'm going ahead and making sure that I dry those inks completely in between with my heat tool. So pulling up the extra ink there, cleaning it off. I just really like the layering that I'm getting. My dog's rolling around in the background, I'm sorry. This has just been a tough video all around, guys. I apologize, but I really hope that you're able to see this technique and how easy this is and how cool this gel plate, this gel press is. There's so many things that you can do with it and create with it. I think it's going to be super, super fun. All right, so I have some more images that I want to now lay down over top of that negative image piece. So this is where you can really have some fun with layering different images on top, adding more depth and interest to your project. I have this really great flower outline here, and that wild honey that I'm using, really, that color really kind of complements that purple and the brown. And now I'm going to lay the piece where I was just using the stamped images onto the plate, and look at that. I used a acrylic block on the back of that just to kind of press down, and I found that that was the best way to get a nice ink transfer, so I would recommend that technique for sure. You have seen me use my fingers or the brayer on the back, but using that acrylic block just to drag on the back of that cardstock really seemed to help get that ink pressed in. So you can kind of see this image here. This started off as the negative image, and then I'm just layering more stamps on top, like this really cool feather, and the looks are just really, really unique. The gel plate that I'm using is a 5x7. I've chosen to purchase that one because most of my cards are A2 size cards, and I just thought that would be a good size for me. They come, I believe, smaller and definitely larger, so if you like to do bigger projects, you might want to go with a larger gel plate. So I'm adding kind of like a postage stamp image onto this typewriter one, and again just continuing to layer it until I get what I like. If your background is something that you're not enjoying, that's okay, don't worry, just keep layering onto it. I guarantee you at some point you're gonna really become fascinated with how you can change the look of it, and you're gonna fall in love with whatever you create. Again, if you don't, go ahead and use that to die cut sentiments out of, or to cut up into strips and make a unique kind of stripped backgrounds for your project. This stamp here, I used I think it was the Wilted Violet. I wasn't sure what the stamp was until I stamped it down, and it's actually the veining from like marble countertops, that veining that you get. And I thought that was really cool. I didn't actually know what that stamp was when I first stamped it down, but now with this whole technique, the possibility of that veining, marble veining stamp is going to be really cool. I'm going to definitely use that one again. And again, that was just one I got from a paper crafting magazine. So now I'm just kind of cleaning up my stamps here, and my project again, there's not a lot that you need to make this happen. A brayer is really nice to have. You can also use a blending tool. I think you saw me do that earlier, where I tried to blend kind of the edges of the colors together because I didn't want to contaminate my ink pads. The acrylic paints you can just literally drip on top and then use like an old credit card or a loyalty card and just kind of like smear them down, scrape them down. This background here is one that I just kind of kept layering on top and I wasn't really in love with. And I just took a stamp that has some script on it, and I just stamped it with some black soot and just continuing to layer it all over this background. And this is actually a really cool card at the end. I'll show you in the video how I made that turn into a card. But look at these backgrounds. They are so much fun. The color, I know, is hard to see right here, but they're vibrant and they're really interesting backgrounds with all the different layers and looks of textures. And again, I'm just cleaning off the stamp there. All right, so I'm going to create a really, really cool background with this Concord & Ninth Barnwood background stamp. So this is the Walnut Distress Oxide ink color, and I'm pulling out this stamp. It's a large stamp, and I wasn't sure how I was going to use it. And then I had a little light bulb moment. I grabbed my Tim Holtz stamp platform and I removed the lid. What a great tool this is to be able to do that. So then I adhered this large background stamp to the lid of my Tim Holtz stamp platform, because you can choose either side. One is for the rubber stamps and one is for the clear. And the fact that you can remove it is brilliant. And I just used that to stamp down onto my gel plate and then stamped it down onto a piece of cardstock. When I originally stamped it down onto the cardstock, because I was working in a small area, I had supplies everywhere, my friends. I was working in limited space and I wanted you to see it. But I'll show you here. I tried to stamp it down on the side and I don't get a great impression, which I thought was really disappointing. And I thought, oh, I kind of buggered that up. But I didn't. I pulled it up there. Really hard to see, sorry, but then I decided to turn it over. I laid the paper on top. I know it's out of frame, sorry, and then I just rubbed it with my hand like I would with the gel press, and the texture I got, oh, look at that. I know it's hard to see, guys, but at the end of the video you'll be able to get a good look at with the still photos. So now I'm going to take this cardstock, lay it down. I wasn't sure what I'd be left with, if it would be a really good image, or yeah, I just wasn't really sure what this stamp would do. But when I pulled that piece off, I was so amazed. Again, using that acrylic block, look at that. Look at that cool textures. Same stamp, two really different looks out of those. And I think that is really, really cool. Really extending the life of your supplies with this. So moving on, I wanted to try it with this brick stamp that I have. And again, I can't link to all these products because some of them I got given to me. I'm not sure where they came from, or I got them from the dollar store, but check around for what you already have. This was kind of my use what I have project. I wanted to use things I hadn't used before. So I think this is a fun way to do that. So with this brick background stamp, I kind of had an idea in mind of how I wanted to use this, and one was just kind of a fun, quirky card using Tim Holtz. What are they? I can't remember the name of it, but his cat stamps. And the other was to create like a Christmas card, because I thought that that brick background really reminded me of like an old fireplace that you might see Santa with. So I did end up creating two cards like that, and I like how they turned out. Again, you'll want to have a variety of acrylic blocks on hand for this. I found that really helped. This one, of course, is the fired brick color. Of course, why wouldn't you use that with a brick background stamp, right? And I'm using my brayer here just to smooth out the color, because sometimes when you put that stamp pad down, if you just stamp it down and not really move it around, you'll get that square image. Well, that exact square image will transfer onto your cardstock. So it does pull whatever you've laid down kind of exactly as you've laid it down. So just something to keep in mind again. All right, I have my cardstocks here, and this one I'm using the watercolor paper. So for the barnwood and this brick background, I use the watercolor, Canson watercolor paper, just to help add that texture, because I think with the brick and the wood, I wanted to pull how watercolor really has that texture within the paper. Again, using the acrylic block, just dragging the edge along to help transfer that. And look at that, two really fun looking backgrounds, negative and the positive of the one. And with this barnwood one too, like, so much fun. There's so many possibilities to use these backgrounds with. Alright, so I do have a piece here I wanted to show you that you can go ahead and continue to layer with stencils. So I have this stencil here that is just some different sizes of circles, and I'm going to lay that down. I'm using my purple whip tape. This is antique linen, and I'm using a blender brush here and just smushing that antique linen Distress Oxide into those little holes of the stencil. Being careful not to move my stencil around, but I just thought this would add a really next level dimension to the project, which it really did. It was fun looking. I'll show you that here in a minute. But you don't have to stop after you do the stamping. Go ahead and pull out your stencils, pull out some dies to layer on top. This is just a project that you really can add a lot of dimension and interest to elevate the level of your cards, instead of just doing you know, our typical stamping. Sometimes we get caught up in just the regular stamping or Copic coloring or watercoloring. Just continue to layer and really create fun dimension and looks. I tried laying a piece of cardstock on top to see if I could get the negative transfer image from this antique linen piece, and I got a little bit. I won't say it didn't work at all. It didn't work as well as I thought it would, but I can still use that. You see it there in the background. I can still use this on a project, so I'm not going to throw it away, even though I'm not 100% happy with it. Alright, so I'll remove that stencil, and you can see it is really, really shiny. I know it's hard to see in this video, but it does have a great shine to it, and I decided, since it was so shiny, I wanted to end up stamping a flower on there, and then add some, what is this? This is my gold embossing powder. I think this is Lawn Fawn gold embossing powder. And just sprinkling that over top of some of those circles, because Distress Oxides at this point, they do stay wet a bit longer, and I just thought this would be really cool to add that embossing just to some of those dots. Some of them will remain white, but some will have this gold embossing on it, and again, it really adds another dimension and layer. So we've got the stamping, we've got the stenciling, and now we are doing some heat embossing just to really elevate it. So here's the finished cards that I've used. Again, I've layered some die cuts to add dimension. Look at these, the colors are just so fun and vibrant. Look at that. I've layered a whole bunch of hellos on top of each other to add dimension. Here's that one with the embossing. Offset a friend die cut and added some blending around the edges. Look at that gold embossing. Just gorgeous. This is that barnwood background. I think that stamp is from Altenew, that floral stamp. I just distressed, use distressed oxides to stamp those flowers. This is Copic coloring on this cup, and really fun shiny cardstock for the thank you. This is that Tim Holtz cat set that I loved, that I thought would look cool against the brick background. And here is my winter stamp. So if you've survived this long, guys, thank you so much for sticking with me. I know this was a tough video to get through. I hope you learned something, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Remember to head on over to the Scrap and Stamp blog as well as my personal blog to check out the supplies. And here's a few more videos. Thanks so much, guys.